Hi everyone, my name is Elizabeth and today I'm going to walk you through how I obtained my Korean F4 visa as a daughter of a Korean adoptee, and I will explain how you guys can do it too. If you're a Korean adoptee or the child or grandchild of one, this video is for you. I'm going to break down how I got my F4 visa in 3 easy steps so you know exactly what to expect and which documents you're going to need. So let's start with some context. If you want to live or work in Korea long term, you're probably already familiar with the various different types of visas you can get as a foreigner. The E2 visa, which is the visa that I first got when I moved to Korea, is used for English teachers, which means your visa is tied directly to your hagwon or school. That means if something happens to your school or if you want to leave, then you risk losing your ability to stay in the country, which means it's a very limiting visa. Another visa option is your E6 visa. This is for your arts and entertainment folks. The problem with this visa is that many talent agencies can be very predatory, especially if you're a foreigner and unfamiliar with your legal rights. So I've heard from a lot of people a lot of different horror stories regarding these visas and overall would not recommend. Another visa that foreigners often get is the E7 visa, which is for skills not found in Korea. Once again, this is going to be your employer sponsoring your visa and also be very limiting as well. So if you're looking to stay in Korea long term, your F4 visa is going to be your best option. The Gyopo visa means that you can work nearly any job, you can freelance or even open your own business. It's fully renewable and there's no cap on how long you can stay. And again, you're not tied to any company or school. And if you're in a bad employment situation, you can always leave. The F-series visas in Korea are not named freedom visas for nothing. So if you are somebody of Korean heritage and want to live a real life in Korea, I highly suggest the F4 visa being the visa that you look into. Let's talk eligibility. Who is eligible for an F4 visa? You can qualify for an F4 visa if you have once held Korean nationality but have since lost it, usually in the case of naturalization to another country, or you are the child or grandchild of somebody who has lost their nationality. I did not think I would qualify for an F4 visa since my mom was adopted in the 70s. I didn't have any connection to Korean culture at all growing up. I didn't grow up speaking Korean, and so I never really considered my heritage being an avenue to a possible visa. However, if your parent or grandparent had Korean nationality, then you can still qualify for this visa. Quick note, for males, there are a couple stipulations regarding Korean military service, so you're gonna have to look into those rules personally because they do change based on age and gender. Also, it's important to note that if your parent or grandparent is still a Korean citizen, then you do not qualify for the F4 visa because visa is for people who have lost their Korean nationality. Now I'm going to break down how I got my visa in 3 easy steps. This is the longest and most complex part, but please stay with me. Step 1 is that language requirements. So you need to show your proficiency and ability to speak basic level Korean so that you can show that you can at least survive in Korea. I highly suggest that you study Korean at least a little bit before moving. And so to pass this test, I suggest having about a semester's worth of Korean under your belt. And so there's 2 options of tests you can take. You can take the TOPIK or the KIIP test. I took the KIIP test, which was online. There was a multiple choice fill in the blank and short writing section, as well as a speaking test. And all you need to do is pass just the minimum requirement to show that you have at least a basic level of Korean proficiency. And I only studied for 2.5 months and I was able to pass the test. That being said, I barely scraped past the minimum requirement, but I still passed. So if you are worried about this and you have any sort of Korean background, I'm sure you're gonna be able to pass the test. This should not be something that really stresses you out. I have seen that online this is not a requirement, but I was still asked for the test results. Might as well go ahead and get your test results. This is where it gets a bit hairy if you are the child of an adoptee. Since my mom was adopted back in the 70s and naturalized to the United States, we had no Korean documents, no family registry, no Korean ID, nothing. So when I was living in Korea, I went to the immigration office hoping that we could create some of these records out of the United States adoption documents that we had, but that was impossible. I realized I hit a dead end. Eventually, I thought that maybe I'd have better luck in the United States trying to get an F4 visa, since the immigration officers would probably be a little bit more English friendly. And then I also assumed that they probably have more experience with adoptee cases. So I just say this as a disclaimer. It felt really impossible for me to get this F4 visa while I was living in Korea with my particular situation, and I found it easier to leave and go overseas back to the United States and get it. As soon as I returned to the United States, I went to the Korean embassy to talk about my situation, and they told me to contact my mother's adoption agency, Holt International, to get any sort of documentations that they would have. So I contacted Holt International and obtained the child material from my mother's adoption, and that took about 2 to 3 months to obtain. When they sent that child material, what we got was letters between the agency and the orphanage, adoption intake files, the family registry, and a bunch of miscellaneous documents that I honestly didn't even expect. So once I had this information, we had to apply for my mother's Korean loss of nationality to show that she once had had Korean citizenship. To prove this, I submitted the following documents: my mom's court adoption papers from the United States, her family registry, information that had obtained from Holt International, her naturalization certificate, her marriage certificate to explain the name change from when she married my father, and a Korean petition for name change document because her Korean name was changed upon her being adopted to the United States. Once I had all of this, I could finally apply for the loss of nationality. Now, it's a bit of a mental loop. To show that she once had Korean nationality, I had to show that she lost her Korean nationality. Once this document is processed by the Korean government, this document will take about 10 months to be fully processed, but while it's doing that, you can also apply for a F4 visa in parallel. Now, you can finally apply for your F4 visa. So when you're doing your application, these are the documents that you're probably gonna need. You're gonna need proof of your Korean parents, grandparents, or yourself, loss of nationality, FBI background check, which has been issued within the last 6 months and federally apostilled, your passport photo, a completed F4 application, your birth certificate to prove your relation to your parent or grandparents, and then also your language proficiency test results, as well as $45 in cash. So once you have all those documents and your FBI background check has been apostilled within the last 6 months, then you can go submit your F4 application. And I know it's a lot to gather, but these documents are going to be really intrinsic in getting that F4 visa processed. So when I had gathered all of these documents, I went to the immigration office and tried to submit my F4 visa application. At that time, they told me to go back and also obtain
a boarding pass
as well before I was able to get a visa. This is not a requirement anywhere online, but this also goes to show that there may or may not be a lot of bureaucracy and hiccups. If you haven't noticed already, it is well worth it, as it is a long-term visa, but it is a nightmare to get. Once I went back with my boarding pass, I was able to finally get my F4 visa, which I have now. So I wanted to end on this. If you yourself are a Korean adoptee or the child or grandchild of one, this is your legal right. Obtaining an F4 visa is not an easy process, and you may face pushback from misunderstandings or language barriers, which is why I wanted to share my experience with you guys, because I remember what it was like in the midst of bureaucracy nightmare when I was searching for a recent detailed English resource of how to get an F4 visa as an adoptee or child of one. So don't give up. Even as a mixed race woman, as somebody who's half Korean and didn't grow up speaking Korean, I was still able to get this visa. And so I have faith that you guys can do it too. Thank you so much for watching. Please share this video with anyone you think it could help. And don't forget to drop your questions in the comments down below. I'll do my best to answer them or point you in the right direction to get those resources that you need. Subscribe if you want more content around living in Korea, identity, and reclaiming our roots. Fun announcement, I will be moving to Korea in a few months and vlogging the whole process. So please subscribe if you're looking forward to more of that content. You got this, loves. Bye!